It's time to get into our amazing guest. Our guest has dedicated her career to empowering aspiring entrepreneurs, nurses, and phlebotomists to tap into the lucrative $13.5 billion drug testing industry. Through her coaching programs and live events, she has successfully guided her 1,000 clients in launching their own drug test centers and clinical labs. Talk about making a significant impact. Y'all, please welcome Miss Sheila Foyes. Well, hello there, Miss Foy. How are you?
I'm so good. Hello, Miss Sisaundra. How are you?
I am blessed. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. You got the memo. You look fantastic.
Well, I knew where I was coming.
Listen to you. You are so kind. So before we jump into your business, I'd love to talk to you about how strong you really are. Not only do you carry the weight of your business, but you've had to do so while grieving the passing of your son. Do you mind sharing with us the moment life took a turn and you got the news about your son?
Yes, I can share that. So about 7 years ago, June 15th, which was actually 24 years, 5 months, and 12 hours to the date, I got a call from my son's aunt, his paternal aunt, and she said there was a shooting at the basketball court. It was on the news, and they're thinking that it was DJ. And so never in a million years did I really think it was DJ. I thought it wasn't DJ. But then my second thought was, well, if it was, he would be shot in the arm, or I definitely wasn't thinking that it was fatal. So I started making calls. I called 911, and I was able to get routed to the Muskogee County coroner, who absolutely confirmed that it was DJ.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
I'm so very sorry. That's a worst nightmare for any parent. That's the worst nightmare. Oh, I have a son that plays basketball, so as you're talking to me, it's like raising hairs on my arm, because when they say, hey, Mom, I'm going to go play basketball, you would never imagine that. And to sit here and hear you say that, it's kind of like, makes it so very at home as well. So I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. How has your grieving process been from the initial time you found out about your son DJ to now, 7 years later?
It's very topsy-turvy. I mean, to be honest with you, it's, I tell people I live between heaven and earth.
Wow.
And they look at me like it's peculiar, but I mean, you've been a mom and a boy mom.
Yes.
And DJ was my first born. As a 17-year-old who made a deliberate decision, right? A deliberate decision to have a child and to see that life taken away. Honestly, it's beyond devastating. It's not, I kind of come in and out of the consciousness of it, if that makes sense. I do thank God for the protection, that he's, the protection and the presence that's gotten me through. Yes. Sometimes I when I think about, the funeral or just certain things, it's like, okay, who was that person who was able to actually get through that? Because I don't know how. So one of the more immediate things that I did was to start a foundation, a nonprofit called the Breakthrough Foundation.
That's wonderful.
And the reason that I did that, thank you, the reason that I did that is because DJ, he was so passionate about basketball, and I thought the squabble was over basketball, but it wasn't. It was drug and gang related, actually. Really? Yeah, DJ was actually set up to be robbed. He was shot in the back of the head. He died instantly. He had no idea what was going on.
I'm so sorry.
And so it wasn't just a squabble over ball. It actually went deeper than that. And but at the same time, he was very attached to basketball. And we talked about other things that he could do, but when he didn't make it as a pro basketball player, I think that became a hang up for him as to, you know, what his purpose was in life and what should he be focused on. And I like to tell people that, you know, there are stories within my story, you know, and so if we just talk about this particular story, it definitely was something with him understanding his purpose, with feeling confident in who he was or who he could be. So I started Breakthrough Foundation. It's at the Breakthrough Foundation, Inc. on Facebook. And we began to give scholarships to youth who were entering college. You know, just to kind of take some of the financial burden off. If somebody was on the fence about school, it wouldn't be about, you know,
the funding.
It wouldn't be about the funding.
Right. That's amazing.
So there were 3 young men that were involved in DJ's murder. And so not only did I lose my son, but those moms, they lost their sons too, because, you know, they're spending 20 years to the rest of their lives in jail.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's where we started. We started there in 2000. So that was 2016. But fast forward 2.5 years later, I went to get a drug test, and God tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, ask him, the guy that was performing the drug test, ask him how did he get started. And I was very hesitant. But the thought that came to my mind was that if I started a drug test center, I could, number one, help people get jobs who might need a second chance because they had a drug addiction or alcohol addiction problem. I thought about the families could be stronger. I thought about moms who might not have kids that they lose, you know, because I feel like people are killing people like people, you can bring them back to life or something. Like, it's like, no, do you realize
you're gone, it's
gone?
Yes.
And it's like somebody would take Afrotainment, the building, and just be like, here's Sisaundra. Like, here's the whole building. That's what it feels like. Like your whole life is in the trash now. I mean, you know, so that's the long answer, but the short answer is grief is so dynamic.
It is.
That, you know, one day, you know, you're happy for the time you were allowed.
Yes.
The next day, you don't understand why it was you. But one thing that
you're just basically telling us about the steps of grief.
Yeah.
Some days you're fine, other days you're sad. It's like a roller coaster. And there's a certain amount of time they say that you have to get through this. Is it 7 steps or 5 steps of grief that we go through? I
heard about 5. I'll be honest. I did put my daughter into a grief program. It's called Kate's Club. It's an amazing organization. I happened upon it. All of the kids took DJ's passing differently. Everybody processes grief their own way. But I never sought formal grief support, to be honest with you. I can't even tell you now that that's something that I can do right now. But I read 5, but I've not been in a formal
setting to understand.
Yeah, I've just been going. That's how I've been dealing with my grief.
For 7 years.
For 7 years.
Wow. So can you tell us, I know you shared with us the reason you wanted to start your company, your foundation. What inspired you to focus specifically on the drug testing industry was something you were starting to share with us. Can you continue to share with us the inspiration for your drug testing?
Absolutely. When I went to get that drug test, I was tired of corporate America. I was a technology leader, a global technology leader. I've worked for the big 4 firms, Accenture, Capgemini. I've done boutique, smaller firm and independent consultant, specializing in higher ed and healthcare, Samaritan Health in Oregon, Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, McKesson, Wake Forest Baptist. So, a lot, Piedmont, Grady.
Yes.
But I was tired of the bureaucracy because I'm a huge creative.
Yes.
But I'm also logical. So when stuff doesn't make sense, it's kind of like, why are we doing that?
Just like that, with that look. Why are we doing
Why are we
this?
doing that? Aren't we smarter than this? Why are we doing
Correct.
this? Seems a little
It's
backwards.
like chasing your tail.
And so when I went, I was actually on a 6-month contract with Cox Enterprises, which is an amazing conglomerate. They have a phenomenal workplace culture. And it was a 6-month contract. And I said, after this 6 months, I don't want to work for anybody else anymore. My husband and I, of course, were newly married. We were a little later in life. We, you know, at that time we had, I think, 2 grandchildren, another one, you know, on the way. And it was like, how can I spend time with my husband? How can I be a grandma?
Wait a minute. And then something really cool you told me too is that you all had 3 kids on each side.
Yes.
So you call yourself the
Foy bunch.
The Foy bunch. It's like the Brady bunch.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the Foy bunch.
That had to be a really cool household
Yeah.
to grow up in and to hang out in.
Yeah, the kids gelled immediately, but again, stories within stories. So I had 3 boys, 1 girl. DJ was my oldest. I have Desmond Miles, who just got a tennis scholarship. Shout out to Tuskegee Tigers. Let's
Yes.
go. Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
And then Keith has Kyla and Kendall. So yeah, 3 boys, 3 girls. What God specifically told me was definitely related to how can I impact the trajectory of my bloodline? How can I impact community? But other aspects were my husband and I having free time. Like me being able to get on a plane and come to the Sisaundra Show without trying to make sure I responded to an email or trying to listen in on a meeting, you know, freedom, right?
Freedom.
And then having time, you know, with the grandkids. So those were, you know, some of the reasons. And then I thought, okay, and honestly, I didn't even look at the drug testing market. Now, I got an MBA in international business. I got a Nova Southeastern, shout out to Nova Southeastern, an undergrad in management from Clayton State. So I knew better, but I'm also spiritual, very spiritual, faith-based. So God told me to do something. I didn't even look at that. I just went to figure out, how do I do it?
So then once you figured it out, we need you to now walk us through the process of starting a drug test center and or a clinical lab. How do you do that?
Yes, so it was quite a challenge when you are starting from scratch, and there truly wasn't anybody who wanted to help me. Okay.
Sounds typical, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
It's unfortunate, but it is
Unfortunately.
typical. Yeah, so there wasn't anyone that wanted to help me, and at that time there weren't like as we know it now, coaching and you know classes,
mentors.
Yeah, not
not
so much.
Right.
This is before COVID. This is 2019. Okay, so I had my company Vision Consulting Partners since 2011 because I was an independent technology consultant traveling, doing HR, finance, payroll for higher ed and healthcare firms. And at this time, I decided I'm going to do a DBA. I'm just going to try this thing out. So I'm being halfway obedient, right?
Just doing business as.
Yeah.
GBA, y'all.
I was like, okay, God, I'm doing 18 months.
Right.
And if it don't work,
Right, I'm
your
out of
girl
here.
is out, right?
That's not faith, is it?
It's not. It's definitely not faith. It's definitely not obedience. And so I Googled, schmoogled, YouTube, whatever, you know, found my way. And now we have Prestige Screening has a product called Launch Your Lab. It is our signature program. We are the first to bring that to the social selling space. You may see people launching labs, drug test centers, they may call it diagnostics, or they may call it patient service center. You know, there'll be different names for it, different terminology, but we are the ones to bring it to the social selling space. I am that founder.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
As you move on so peacefully, it's like, no, congratulations,
Thank
that's
you.
major. So you're pioneering this movement.
Yes.
How does your coaching programs and live events assist clients in penetrating the $13.5 billion drug testing market that we were talking about?
Yes. Let's talk about $13.5 billion. It's the success framework. So what I teach my clients is what I use to successfully start, sustain, and scale my drug testing business.
Start, sustain, and scale.
Yes.
The 3 S's.
The 3 S's.
I love that.
Yeah. So we operate off a success framework, and I'm okay to share it in terms of the first thing that you want to do is identify what is going to be your location model, right? So are you going to be brick and mortar? Are you going to be mobile? Are you going to be both? And when people ask, like, which one, I'm always saying, which one does your client need? Brick and mortar sounds great, you know, but if
you may have an online base or customer base.
you may have a client that doesn't really need their folks to show up to you. They need you to show up to their folks. For maybe particularly with Department of Transportation, right? Because every, you know, we said quarter, they're random drug screens. So I want you to come to my space for the drug screen because these employees are on the clock. So it's saving me time and money for you to come to me. If I'm a trucking company and I got an accident, my driver was in an accident, I need you to come to me. So, and that's just one example.
That makes sense.
So you got to figure out, okay, what is my location model? The next thing is offer. Who am I selling to? When I first started, I thought that everybody was my customer. I can drug test everyone in the studio.
Right.
Like, for one reason, right? Because why could everyone in the studio require or need a drug test? So maybe you decide you want to adopt, family planning. Maybe somebody's getting their CDL regulated, right? Maybe there's someone going for a healthcare job and they need it, you know, so there are maybe
so many reasons.
Pain management, right? There's so many reasons that somebody could be getting a drug screen. So you need to figure out who is your target client. The next thing is you need to get qualified. So you don't have to be qualified for non-regulated training, but you do have to be qualified for regulated training. Okay, there is a formal and it's not certification, it's qualification. It's just qualification. You have to do that. And you got to do what? Know how to get business. And I think that has been the gap with a number of people because they may be working with someone who is not trained in business.
Right.
Right? They may be and you don't have to be formally trained, but you at least gotta be.
You gotta know something.
Yeah, you gotta know something. So I can say, hey, Sisaundra, we can slap up a logo and you know, and get you some lab accounts and get you some TPA accounts. You don't
know the infrastructure.
That doesn't
of
mean
what's
anything.
Going on. Correct.
So you have to go through the customer journey to be able to systematically, consistently have revenues in your business, right? Also, you have to know how to get to the next level. We don't think big enough. I tell my clients this all the time.
We need to think bigger.
We need to think bigger. Do you know how petrified we were to reach out to you?
Were you? Oh my goodness.
And I said, she can only say yes or no.
Exactly. The ask. We have not because we ask not.
She can only say yes or no.
And look, you're here today
I'm just
because
saying
you,
yes.
of course, yes. Now let's talk about profitability. You're talking about what kind of income potential can one expect from starting a drug test center or clinical lab. So we've talked about the different ways you can do it, why you should do it. Let's talk about how do you tap into it. So the potential one can expect, what is that potential?
Yep. So you have companies that have been in the game a while, right? I mean, you're talking about people who are clearing at least or on average 40K a month, right? When you're talking about companies who are just starting out, and that's a great question because I get that from a lot of prospective clients and a lot of clients, and I always set the expectation, I don't know what God has for you. And I'm not being flip. I don't know what God has for you. I don't know what your business acumen is. I don't know what your specific market is.
Correct.
So we have to go into those things. So I like to, number one, work with people on why do you even want to start a drug test center and clinical lab?
The why.
Right? What is it that you're bringing to the table that you can leverage already, right? Then what's really happening in your area, right? And then here are the actual things that you need to be doing as a true CEO who's running
your company.
a company. So it's the marriage or the marrying or the, integrating of all of those
So
things.
do you do one-on-ones with everyone? Because it sounds like it needs to be tailor-made for each person. That's awesome.
We do. We do group. We have group programs, but we also have individual programs. But as far as revenues, there is a piece of the pie for everyone. You could totally start a mobile drug test center right here in Orlando and never touch anybody. I would then also look at somebody who may have zero experience, right? They may have zero professional experience, let alone, any type of background. Well, something like that, they could even go into possibly a salon suite if they didn't want to be mobile. Drug testing on the collection side has typically paid, $10 to $30 a test. But if you're someone who is making $10, $15, $20 an hour at your job, and you now have the capability to make up to $60 an hour, even off $6, $10 drug screens, right?
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
Exactly.
So the market is, I say it is there's low barrier to entry, but it can be as little or as much.
Great. Yes.
Yeah. And it just really
depends on.
When I started, I was taking $10 a drug screen because I didn't know anything.
Right.
But it allowed me to get the data so I could know some things. So I'm really being paid to get trained. But that's not everybody. Everybody isn't doing a $10 drug screen. Correct. But I like to be transparent with people so that they know, like on the low end, it could be $10, $15, $20, $30. But then on the high end, you're talking a hair test. Let's say that somebody was in construction, which typically favors hair tests. A 12-panel hair test can be somewhere upwards of $300.
That's incredible.
And your profit margin can be $150 to $200. So
So it depends.
It really depends.
I tell you what, it's been absolutely fascinating listening to you tell us about an industry and how you turned your pain into purpose. Thank you so much for joining us. Y'all, it's a $13.5 billion industry out here waiting on you. Check out Miss Sheila Foyes, the founder of CEO of Precis Screening. And until tomorrow, y'all take care of yourselves. We'll be back here on the Sisaundra Show. Chris!
Y'all ready to get screened?
Come on.
Scan that QR code at the bottom of your screen. Not that screen. Because we got way more exclusive content for you right here on the Sisaundra Show. Only on Afro TV, Comcast Xfinity. 16.
Get it all out, Chris.
he said,
Yes! Hello, everyone. If you are at work, at home, y'all drop everything and tune in because it's time for the Sisaundra Show!
Yeah!
Listen, I'm just kidding. Don't y'all get fired. Don't drop everything at work. Listen, speaking of fired, y'all.